This is a model of the wooden shelter on the opposite platform at Etwall station. Etwall was a picturesque rural railway station on the Great Northern Line's Derbyshire extension, which was completed in 1878. And this model is the first of a number of buildings that I'm making for a layout set in the early 1920s. And I must say I'm thoroughly enjoying the chance to model a pre-grouping colour scheme. So having completed the platform shelter, I'm now working on the main station building. And I'm doing this in component parts because I realise that the building naturally falls into three sections. Clearly I've still got a lot of work to do on this. And I'd like to break buildings down if I can, because the larger they become, the harder they are to handle. And I wanted to try and advance all of these sections as much as possible before I assemble the whole thing. So at the moment, I'm concentrating on the main station house. This is the bit in the middle of the building where the station master would have lived. And before I start putting roof slates on, I wanted to complete the barge boards for the gable ends. And that's what I'm working on at the moment, and that's what I intend to show you. So while I was looking at the photographs, I realised that the barge boards have got a little bit of design in them. They have some fluting in the leading edges on the inside, and they abut to finials that go down the middle. So the idea was to try and recreate that look in 4mm scale. And to do that, conveniently, I realised that three of these gable ends on the main house are exactly the same size. So in order to reproduce three identical sets of barge boards, I just produced a jig. And I did that by, when I first cut out the elevations for the construction of the model, I took a pencil drawing of the roof line, and that became a template which I've then translated to this piece of scrap plastic card. And on the card I've followed the angle of my template and created a cutting line for shaping the barge board components, and then this piece for starting to assemble them as a three parts to make the model. So that's the process that I'll just walk you through now. In order to do this, I cut some 5mm plastic strip from a sheet of 20 thou plastic, and that will form the back side of the barge board. And then I'll be offering up a slightly thinner piece, 4mm piece, on the top of that, which will give us that fluting appearance at the bottom of the barge board there. And then these will all be trimmed to the right angle. And then I've also got to make these little shaped ends, and there are three sides of an hexagon. So there's a bit of maths to do on that, but I've already done the calculations and I'll show you how that works. So I'll start with my 5mm strip, and what I want to do is cut the vertical line where it will join with the finial. So by butting my blade up to these two little lugs that I've put on the jig and snipping like that, that should give us a nice snug fit with the finial there. I don't need to cut this off at the bottom yet, but I will need to do that with the 4mm strip. So this is the one that is going to go on top of the 5mm piece. Again, I need that same angle at the top there, and I offer this into there, and this time I am going to trim this one off at the base because that's where the bottom of the roof line is there. And then I want to glue this to my 5mm strip. So put the two in there together and make sure they all sit snugly. I want some plastic weld and very carefully glue these to one another trying not to glue the whole thing to my jig. So as soon as that's on there, I want to get this out just in case it does stick. And I can run some weld down that edge as well. And that should be fairly good in a matter of moments. So if I put that back in my jig, I can now start to look at this hexagonal business at the bottom, and what I want is a bit of scrap from the base of the 5mm strip, which is this one, and I shall just cut this off square and that's going to go on top to give me that little bit at the base that looks like an hexagon. So I'm going to just offer that up to there and glue it in. Like that. Making sure that's up to the corner on the left hand side there, and then just leave that for a moment to go off. While that's setting, actually you could make the second one for the opposite side. So using the other end of that 5mm strip, if I trim my vertical piece there, turning that over, we know that's going to fit there all right. Want to do the same with this. Here's my 4mm strip. So I want the vertical cut there, and then that's ready to go onto there as soon as I've trimmed the bottom off. So once that's in the jig, go to the bottom line there and cut that across. Then that piece can go on top of that piece in the jig there. Just weld that in place and run some weld down the back and the top, and that should all hold together. And while that's drying, I'll just go back to the piece I was working on earlier. So here I can use this left hand vertical edge. If I trim along there, that will become the outer edge of that hexagon shape. If I turn that over and trim along this diagonal here, that will give me the inner edge of the hexagon shape. And if I put that back in the jig, you'll understand what I mean. So I've now got the inner bit and the outer bit. And if I go down 2mm from that outside point, that shows me the drop of the outer ones. I've already marked on my jig where the bottom of this whole assembly will come to. So I know that I can trim that off there, so that will give me the hexagon at the foot of the piece. So all I then need to do, I've got my angle that side, there's my vertical one there, so I just need to take that corner off, and I can level this up a little bit, and there we are. That's it. That makes that shape at the bottom of the barge board. So I'll make a mark in the center where in a few minutes time, when that's all gone off, I'll drill a hole. But in the meantime, I'll go back to the other side and using my bit of 5mm that I cut off earlier, just making sure that that is actually a right angle. Then I can glue that on to the bottom to give us the drop for the decorative bit. Come to that. Once again, I can trim off following the angle on the reverse. I can trim off that vertical angle. Don't worry about that join. If we need to, we can put a bit of filler in there, but actually activate the plastic boiling with a bit of plastic welding. Quite often those gaps will fill for you. So the only other thing I need to do now is to put that back in the jig. There's my bottom line, so we know that's where the bottom of the hexagon will come to. So all I've got to do then is go down 2 millimeters from the base, just mark that, and then trim that off to give me the other edge, and I'll just flatten that out a bit, actually, bottom there. So I can put a mark there for where the hole will go, and then it's a matter of getting a bit of scrap. Then I can drill these holes. Normally I'd allow a lot longer for all of this to go off, but for this demonstration you'll get the idea. So the hole goes in the middle there. And I can clean that round a bit. And then we'll hole this side. And clean that up. And a bit of work with a file later on just to have a tidy, and that should be fairly presentable. So that it just remains then to take one of the finials that I'd already made. That's a bit of 40 thou square plastic strip, and I've just rounded the end and put a little bit of detail on there. So I'll just cement this piece to the edge there, offer that in so it goes right up to the top. This is probably the fiddliest bit, actually. It is definitely the fiddliest bit. So that goes there. Then I want to do the same the other side, bit of mech on there, and offer that in there. And that should give us the barge boards ready to go into the gable end.